Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Los Andes and its nerfs, which are much more significant than Libertad, which of course I looked at last week. We found that the Libertad, well, nerfed, and those engine nerfs are substantial, making it much less likely to drift around the map like a light cruiser on an engine boost. The ship is still incredibly powerful and more than capable of its brawling playstyle that I and others enjoy so much. Personally, I'm very happy to see that it retains that characteristic and that playstyle. I think there's definitely some things Wargaming could take a look at to make these ships, most importantly, less frustrating to fight against. I think there's some areas they could look at in regards to armor, as well as the turning radius and rudder shift. We talked about that with the Libertad, though. With Los Andes, we also have that same reduction to its engine power, which is really good. We're not drifting around nearly as much. That is on paper, as well as what played out for me while playing the Los Andes here for this video. But we also have a massive nerf to the secondary DPM. The secondary DPM on Los Andes is actually worse than Ipiranga now. You move up a tier and you have less DPM. That's not the full story. Okay, I'm maybe ignoring that there's a 6th upgrade slot where we can take secondary reload, but still, on paper, at its base level, it is a massively reduced secondary DPM. It's around a 27-28% nerf to the secondary DPM here on these 127s, as well as the 234s. They still retain the same range, they still retain the same accuracy, so no change there. This F key is still ridiculous, and I think that's perhaps where this ship is still going to be incredibly powerful. You're going to see in these two games I have here for you, we're going to do a lot of damage still out of these secondaries. Yes, over 25% is a big nerf, but that doesn't mean this ship can't still perform. The engine change does mean we're more likely to get hit, we're more likely to eat torpedoes, and these secondaries do mean we're going to take a little longer to take people out. But I think there's a problem here for Wargaming when balancing this ship, and that's got to be Lisboa, this commander that has not come back yet. It's been a while now, and they still have not returned the collection for people to finish it, unfortunately. Really wish they would cut out this FOMO crap, especially not even telling us when he'll be available again. Perhaps that's even worse than if we knew he'd be back in a few updates or something like that. Just some feedback, Wargaming. Maybe consider actually telling us when these things are coming back. I think that's a reasonable request. But this guy gives us 22.5% better reload on our secondaries when we get enough hits. That's a huge buff, alongside a 5% buff to our main gun reload when we have enough main gun and secondary hits. It takes us a little while, and I do think this nerf to the secondary DPM means it's going to take us a little longer to get that buff. But 22.5% buff to our DPM midway through the match is a lot. Consider that Lucian's is going to give you a 15% buff to your secondaries, and just that on the required number of secondary hits. That is wild. And the other talent for Lucian's, giving it better reload, 7.5% main gun reload, requires you to get 140 hits with just your main guns, which is not happening in a battleship for the most part. So for Los Andes, for Libertad, for Valparaiso, you do get these opportunities to buff your main gun reload by 5%, secondaries by 22.5%. when you meet the requirements there. It is a little bit higher. It's not the 100 secondary hits like we see on Lucian's. It's 175, but that's combined. It's not too bad. And it's a massive buff. That may be a big issue here for this ship. And really for all these ships, these battleships that Wargaming is trying to balance here. The commander adds a pretty massive variable in the power level of these ships, all these battleships that have such powerful secondaries and a lot of main guns. Getting that reload down is a big deal, but 22.5%, that is nearly the amount that this ship just got nerfed on its secondaries. So if you have Lisboa, was this ship really nerfed that much relative to someone without Lisboa pre this patch? Yes, the acceleration was changed, but as far as the secondary DPM, I don't know. We've also activated our combat instructions here. Of course, these combat instructions also giving us a DPM buff, a range buff, and just an outright alpha damage buff. That's something like an Atlantico doesn't have. I speculated a little bit with Libertad in that video that they may have cooked a little too hard here on the gimmicks, and perhaps that's why it's so difficult to balance these ships. There's very large variability in the power level of these ships depending on the commander, and as well as how often and how consistently you're able to activate these combat instructions. Gimmicks can be good. It's good to have a unique playstyle. But considering Atlantico's power level and how that's a fun ship, but I don't think people thought that to be a very brokenly overpowered ship. It is powerful at close range, but I don't think we saw it as the all-powerful tier 8 that is just running the show at that tier. I do find it very interesting, that difference there between the old premium Atlantico and these new tech tree ships. And I think a big part of it is the acceleration and the just sheer maneuverability of these ships over Atlantico. And fortunately, they've looked at most of that. The drifting ability has been toned down, but thanks to the really solid rudder shift and turning circle radius here on both the Libertad Los Andes, it still has the ability to avoid a lot of incoming damage. Los Andes has an 860 meter turning radius alongside a 13-second rudder shift. That's still going to let you dodge a lot of incoming fire, especially relative to a lot of the more standard vanilla tier 9 battleships. We often don't see that level of maneuverability. So yes, it'll slow down, but you can still move this ship around rather easily. So that's where, again, alongside that Libertad video, I'm more sure of myself now after playing Los Andes here that I think this ship needs those parameters looked at as well. Not only does it need the reduction in acceleration that we got, very good wargaming, but also I think a more standard tier 9 battleship rudder shift, perhaps an even below average tier 9 battleship rudder shift and turning circle radius would be warranted here. I still want to keep this armor scheme for the most part. The Citadel we'll talk about. I want the tankiness when angled. I want the ridiculous number of guns at close range. I think that's a funny, interesting, different unique play style in this game. It is a ship that should be pretty weak at range, but rewarded when playing at close range, but angled, but for not getting into crossfires. And a big problem here actually is that Los Andes, I think, may have stronger broadside belt armor, specifically the Citadel armor, than the Libertad even does, which is surprising. It actually has 3 plates you have to get through. Libertad has 2, so there's a bit of spaced armor. There's more opportunities to have the spaced armor eat up shells here with the Los Andes. So a tier lower and potentially a little bit better. Something like Navarin's a great example here. That's a good ship in a brawl, but if you go broadside, you take damage, right? Like, this is what I'm looking for out of these ships. I want them to be pretty tanky when angled, but if they get into a crossfire, which, let's be honest, is pretty easy to set up in the early game, so it'd force you to be patient. It wouldn't let you just YOLO in without any thought at the start of matches and do incredibly well like you used to and probably still can do with Los Andes and Libertad. I think that's a big important issue there, where it would reward playing against these ships in creative ways and finding those crossfires to deal massive damage to it. I think that's fun on both sides. I think that's fun for the person playing the Los Andes and Libertad line here. It makes it more interesting to play, makes you consider more possibilities, and when counterplay is considered, I think it's really fun to catch someone out and dev strike them, okay? I'm a little biased, yes, I'm a Battleship player, I know, but I think that's a really interesting thing to have happen, where someone is so powerful in their ship, yet if you can outposition, outmaneuver them, suddenly they're at a massive disadvantage and going to go down. I think that's really cool. Very good first game there. That was actually my first game playing Los Andes after this nerf. And this is the second game. Yes, I played 2 games back to back, and these are the results. So it's still good. I think the vast majority of you probably realize these ships are still incredibly powerful, and this is a random battle, so I can only imagine how Los Andes can do in ranked still. Those games with fewer numbers of ships in the matchmaker, of course, have an advantage for those that want to be pushing in, playing aggressive. You just don't have as much to worry about as far as those crossfires go, or getting focused down early. But for Los Andes, I think another interesting element of the ship is it actually has better firing angles on its secondaries and its main guns compared to Libertad. So it's not much. Libertad being 35 degrees forward, 33 degrees backwards for its main guns. Los Andes being 30 and 30. So a little more comfortable there, which is not usually what we see. We usually see that comfort come at tier 10, where the tier 9 may have a lot of the power in the DPM damage output of the tier 10 perhaps, but it lacks the armor and perhaps the firing angles to allow it to consistently use that without getting punished. Not so in this case. Secondary is also 20 degrees forward, 23 degrees backwards for Los Andes, where Libertad has 28 forward and 23 backwards. Interesting, hey? Interesting. I think there's still a lot they could take a look at here, but I think you're going to notice here, even if we remove a lot of the maneuverability, including the acceleration, as we've already done, but including the rudder shift and that turning circle radius in those nerfs, you're still very tanky when angled. So if you can find a position like this using island cover, trying to isolate 1v1s as best you can, these ships are still incredible. Which is why I wish we didn't have those massive buffs that they gave these ships on release. I still think they were incredible in testing when I was able to make that video before they launched. As a CC, I do get that privilege to get you guys content on release day, on the NDA lift that is. The ships didn't have that acceleration, and yet they were still quite solid. We're going to do a ton of secondary damage in this one, by the way. That's the main reason I'm bringing this one in. That first game, I think, showed you well enough, but this one, we are absolutely munching through this Montana. Not necessarily just main guns. I mean, our main guns are okay, but nothing too special. The secondaries being able to pen 59 millimeters is the real treat here, allowing us to just easily do a ton of damage through anywhere on this Montana, except his turrets or the Citadel armor belt. Plasma here as well. We have to be a little careful of the improved pen angle AP on these experimental ships. So we got to angle in a little bit more than the 30 degrees that it would take to fire all of our guns. So we're going to be a little bit cautious. You noticed I was doing that in the Libertad as well. A good strategy can be, if you have to take these longer duration engagements in front of people, don't get greedy for all of your guns. Just fire the front 3 or so. That kind of thing can keep you more angled and take a lot less damage. And I want to go back and talk real quick about the secondary DPM of this ship again. I talked about it being worse than the tier 8, and with the buffs you can make it better still than the tier 8, don't you worry. But as a baseline, the hitting DPM at 10 kilometers, we get 29,000 secondary hitting DPM out of Los Andes before any of those buffs, which is still a little bit higher than Freddy. Or Pommern or Turpitz. So even in this nerf state, without the buffs, without the commander, which now we've activated, without the F key, it's still a little bit better DPM than the Freddy gets or the Pommern gets, alongside this ship having much, much better pen on the secondaries, not having to take IFHE for the big secondaries to full pen 32 or even higher. 59 mil pen is kind of wild. The angles are better. This ship has the improved heals, where the heals come back every 60 seconds rather than every 80 seconds. These kinds of things still make Los Andes, I mean, the superstructure being tiny, I've talked about that for years when it comes to those German battleships and how difficult it is to brawl with them when you have such a massive weak point that is very exploitable at those closer ranges. There's a lot still here that makes these ships really powerful. The guns are a weak point of this line, yet in these situations at closer ranges, it doesn't matter quite so much that the guns aren't as strong in theory as the others at your tier. Like a lot of the other tier 9 battleships will have more pen, better accuracy, more alpha damage. But if you're catching people out at close range, you're still gonna do an absolute ton of damage. And the last thing here, when it comes to maneuverability, it still has that rudder shift and the turning circle radius. While it doesn't drift consistently, the initial turn-in of these ships is still incredibly sharp and feels like you can drift around shells. You're not going to be turning full rudder and retaining a ton of speed like you would in, say, a Minotaur. That's what it used to feel like. Now, though, you can't do that. But the initial turn-in like this, we're dodging Laria shells at 10 kilometers. This is why I think it's important to look at the rudder shift and the turning circle radius. Perhaps the rudder shift could be just looked at by reducing the acceleration further down to standard battleships, that not having the small improvement that we see already given to these ships, but at the cost of not actually getting propulsion mod. It is much reduced acceleration, but it still has it's essentially like you had prop mod pre-slotted to your ship, and that allows you to free up that slot to take rudder mod, for example, like I've done here. Maybe that's an option to change things as well, force you to pick between the propulsion mod or rudder shift again, these kinds of things. I just would be really sad if these ships lost the insane identity that they have of a massive amount of gun power and the ability to actually push in and take some hits and not feel like you're throwing your ship away by pushing in a little bit. And that's how I feel with the German battleships, Brawling battleships, the old GK line, Preußen line now. You should probably play those as a tank build, a mid-range tank build with reload, not pushing in too aggressively. And I'm a little bit disappointed in that, and that's why I like this line in its current state. It is overtuned, I think, still. I would be of the opinion we could also look at the concealment. I think it should just be seen from a long ways off at the end of the day. That's what it comes down to. I think you should see this ship from a long ways off. It should be slow enough that it's not going to instantly catch up with you. I think it should be not maneuverable, so maneuverable that it's dodging a lot of that incoming fire. It's already got great heals and great armor. And I think that would be fun still. I think that would still be fun for the people playing this line, but it would also make it less frustrating to fight against, especially if we take a look at this Citadel, which we will do soon as we are about to go down. I should not have full pushed like this. I was pushing these games because I wanted to see what the ship could get away with still, and we had some incredible games. These games were back to back. Absolutely insane what this ship is still capable of. Over 3 million potential damage into a super ship game. And fortunately, even though I made the mistake of full sending, even though we had a win on our hands and potentially throwing it, my teammates did not. So thank you, teammates, for not throwing that like I did, for example. Another game with that expert badge. So we're doing pretty okay. And our secondary hits getting us a ton of damage in this one. The damage output is still high. It's not like it's the end of the world here for this ship. We got over 100k, just barely, in raw secondary damage. And another 25k from those fires. It's still very good. We were fighting ships that we could full pen, but the vast majority of them we are capable of full penning with these larger caliber secondaries. Now back in port, let's take a look at the build that I was running. It still hasn't changed that much, and I hope you've understand kind of what I'm saying here in this video. It's been a little bit tricky to figure out how to convey my thoughts on these ships. I gotta be very honest with you. I'm so happy something like this exists in the game. I'm so tired of the very passive meta that we've shifted towards over the years of development of World of Warships. So I'm very, very excited and enjoy having this kind of ship playstyle in the game. But I also recognize that it's very frustrating to fight against in a lot of ways too. So I'm trying to figure out ways, I'm trying to come up with ways that maybe give wargaming ideas to nerf these ships in the right areas that keep and retain the playstyle interesting and ability to push in that I like so much, while also dealing with and fixing those areas that are so frustrating to fight against. I think that's probably a very difficult thing to do. I certainly do not have the answers, but I've come up with some thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. But the build here looked like this. I was running Lisboa. He's now for Valparaiso. So the build has changed back to the insane healing one. But I did run Lisboa just to see how the insanity would go with that full buff. But this is what I was running. A big portion of building a ship and its commander is trade-offs. You have a limited number of skill points to put into your commander. You also just have a limited number of slots. So you have to decide between things like steering gears, damage control. But we don't here. We don't have to choose between steering gears or propulsion mod to improve our maneuverability. I think that needs to come back. I think that's a really important element of building your ship, and why a lot of these can feel the same. All these Los Andes can feel like they're powerful in the same ways because there's really one way to build them. There's not a lot of build diversity here. And so I think keeping things like propulsion bonuses tied to an upgrade that also has other viable options is important. And that way, not every Los Andes you see or every Libertad you see is drifting around the map with insane rudder shift. And yes, the propulsion has been nerfed now, but you know what I mean. A little bit more nerf and give us prop mod back to make us choose. I think another option of that, or another example of that, is actually our concealment. Taking no conceal on our commander here and only taking in the upgrade still gets us 14-2 detect, which is perfectly reasonable for a tier 9 battleship. But we can take concealment and get down to 12-6 or something like that. I don't have to do that. I would rather have the extra heal, for example, here. That's why I'm sacrificing concealment. And so maybe that's an interesting trade-off that I've made, but I think it should be more like a normal battleship detect here, maybe 13.5 detect max. And if I don't take one of the concealment upgrades, maybe it's 15 kilometer detect. Something along those lines would make me consider more, should I be taking the extra healing here or should I take concealment? And then I'd have to decide, well, an extra heal, that 5th heal can be very useful. Am I willing to give up Adrenaline Rush for that 5th heal with improved repair party readiness? As I sometimes do on other battleships. Sometimes I will take that extra heal instead of Adrenaline Rush. Although less so these days. I don't know. I'm always playing with these secondary battleship builds. They're in a state of constant flux where I'm swapping things around all the time. But decisions like that I think are very important and interesting, and trade-offs. But a ship like this one, where its built-in concealment is better, its built-in rudder and turning radius is better, its built-in acceleration means you can afford to you're not taking rudder, so you can take steering. I think they need to add some of that back. Less baked-in upgrades, less. I mean, I didn't even touch on the F key giving you a massive bonus, and then Lisboa giving you even further bonuses. They cooked a little too hard on the baked-in gimmicks, perhaps, here. I think something like Atlantico, very interesting, very fun, still has that brawling, tons of gun playstyle, but it's not so fast. It's a lot slower. It has a longer rudder shift time. It still has very good detect and turning radius, though. And importantly, this ship has one of the worst citadels as far as gameplay goes in the entire game. This is just disgusting. Look at how low below water that is. It's unhittable. Why'd they even model a citadel at that point, right? I would be one to say, I want this, or even a little more, a little higher than this even. Let these ships be punished when they make a misplay. Los Andes has that slightly above water citadel, which is great, but it's 51 millimeters, protected by angled 380, protected by another 51. So I think you actually have more armor than Libertad in that case. Libertad, of course, only has 406 plus 51. So you can see why it's very difficult to get through these things and actually citadel them, even though the citadel is a little bit above water here. I wish these citadels were right at the side, so there's no spaced armor, no chance for those non-pens, the black hole armor, as well as making it flatter and just 380, for example. I think that would be great. I think that'd be much better to play against in particular. But let me know what you think in the comments of these ideas. Los Andes is by no means nerfed into the ground and useless anymore. It is still incredible. It's very, very powerful. The secondaries are fun. The ability to brawl is still here, and I'm very happy for it. I'm just worried it's still a little bit unfun to play against. And for Wargaming, I would say they have a difficult job in trying to balance out retaining the fun pushing playstyle that this line can do and that I'm such a fan of, while also keeping in mind what it's like to actually fight these things and trying to balance that. It's difficult. But thank you very much for watching this video and have a great rest of your day.